Yeah,
Robin. There's two issues. One, the media works on superlatives, so the best, the biggest, the fastest, the worst, and they will always take the extremes. So, a woman giving birth to twins, not interesting. 8 babies, interesting, that gets the news. So they'll always go for the extremes. Now, the other issue here is once you start to have a rolling news system, the media, and it boils down to sound bites again, they will develop a shorthand. So Islamic terrorist is a shorthand to describe a particular type of person. And that shorthand then doesn't get explained. That's simply used in news parlance forevermore. Now, there are some programs, some channels, Channel 4 particularly comes to mind, where they do try and explain the terminology that they use, that they have a much more careful approach, I would say, to looking at very sensitive issues, and occasionally they will do a full hour-long program that explores an issue in quite some depth. Now, you're never going to get that on a rolling news program. You've got 5 minutes at the very most to explain something, and that's when the shorthand comes in, and that's when you start to get the very superficial viewpoint that encourages bias and encourages a lack of genuine
So
debate.
something I'd like to ask the whole panel, as compared to other stories, do you think there's more negative shorthands, like we mentioned, specifically for Islam? Do you think it's being picked out in any respect?
I mean, this is to the shame of the Ummah of Islam itself, that there are, and it has to be emphasized, this is always a minority of people who do, tarnish the name of Islam because of their actions which are clearly against the conduct of the Prophet himself, as history proves. Now, it is also important, though, to know about what they do, because this is what the media is about. It's all about informing people and notifying them what happens around the world. So it is of interest to people to know what is happening in Pakistan or in Iran or Saudi Arabia, for instance.
Let me just move on to the audience. Do you think the reason why Muslims are being shown in the media in a negative way is the way that they react to, to these problems in the media? Are there any views amongst you about how, is it the way that Muslims react that actually gets them this negative press? Has anyone got any views?
No, I don't think that's entirely correct. I don't think it's correct at all. From what I've heard so far from the panel is that the news always targets the extreme. So there is another side, a huge side, which is not being looked at. And the second point is that there is a huge commercial aspect to what is shown and what is not shown. So both of these things put together really does make me doubt, what I'm hearing within the news. And as I've mentioned before, there are, other forces at play as well. To give you a very simple example, before the Iraq War, why was there all of a sudden so many programs on Iraq?
Dal, you haven't said anything, and would you like to?
I was going to say something along the lines of, similarly to what Tahir was saying, that sometimes Muslims do vent their anger to these kind of biases in the media in what I feel an excessive way. I was in Pakistan during the time that the cartoon issue came up in the media, and some of the people there in Islamabad were blowing up KFC, blowing up the Daewoo bus service, in effect blowing up a lot of their infrastructure. And I thought to myself that this obviously isn't the right way to do it, and I guess the media has a right in that sense to portray these extremist type of reactions to this kind of bias in the media.
That's an interesting point. I mean, Robin, if I could turn to you, the people who act in this way call themselves Muslims, so aren't the media doing the right thing in reporting what's actually happening?
Well, the media will report something. If people are doing something like burning buses or burning a book in public, they will obviously, those images will go around the world, and they, without even any commentary that's attached to those images, they say something to the public. Now, I want to just come on to the issue of, the word terrorism is a very apt word, and terror, the striking of fear in people's minds is a very powerful emotion. So the fear of the unknown, the fear that you might potentially be harmed, is a very powerful emotion. And I think that is why it's so important for people to not have a fear of the unknown, and therefore to understand what Islam is about, what code Muslims follow. And the more they know about it, the more it becomes a familiar concept and an understood concept, the less chance there is of that fear emerging in people's minds. And I think the fear of the unknown is a very, very powerful issue, and I think it's one that actually the Muslim community more widely needs to tackle, and to be much more open, to be as open as possible, to get out there, to say what you believe, and particularly for people.
Now, I mean, Robin, in your previous experience, you did a lot of work after 9/11. So how did you kind of counteract that?
Yes, and the fallout from 9/11 was very serious for I mean, as you know, for Muslims here, and our advice to all Muslim communities was to not. The temptation was to batten down the hatches. They were under attack from all sorts of areas, and to not go out and talk in the media, to not actually promote what they believed. And our advice was to get out there and do precisely that, because they had to counter some of those negative perceptions, some of those negative images being generated.
I think, taking from what Gordon said earlier on in a nutshell, that he tried to get this broadcaster about this program, which was relating something to do with our community, and they did not take the cue. This is where it explains the whole thing, that the media is so much influenced itself by, and then so much ratings driven, that they thought that this small community, albeit that they could be saying the facts, they could be the ones who are actually denouncing violence, they could be the ones who are actually creating some kind of harmony in the community and showing the true face of Islam. Yet, because in their research, they found out that, oh, these are the controversial Muslims, so why go with them? They are the minorities.
So if that is the case, then how can these groups and organizations get across their own viewpoints in the media?
That is exactly where the responsibility of the media, in terms of they being honest with their profession and journalism, lies, that they should try to portray the true picture of whatever the story they're showing.
Okay. Yeah, Robin?
We are in a situation, though, now, today, in this world, today's world, where the media, yes, they're very powerful, but they're not all powerful, in the sense that you can, an individual person now can use the internet. They can use YouTube, they can use a blog, a website, to get their point of view across in a way that simply was not possible 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now, even 5 years ago, you would have to buy a TV station or buy an advertising slot. You'd have to buy a newspaper to get your point of view across. Today, you can log on to YouTube free. You can get a website for about 19 quid. So, the actual route to get out to a world community and get your point of view across is much, much easier now than it was a few years ago.
Linked with that is, as well as the use of these new mediums that are available, the internet, etc., I think perhaps because there is this prevailing frustration still at the way in which perhaps their community is being portrayed in the media, there is also the emergence of independent Muslim satellite channels such as MTA, magazines, websites, etc., which also presents the world with an alternative way of presenting news. Al Jazeera is a very good example, which has also attracted some of the best presenters from Western channels. And it's a very different way of presenting news, where there is a very different perspective that is being shared.
Let me go back to the audience. Do you feel empowered more with all the different ways you can actually get your views portrayed in the media? Has anyone got any views on that?
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying, we're in a very different world now with the advent of the internet. And I mean, I personally have been able to write letters and have them published in newspapers like The Times and The Independent, where I've had a paper regarding the cartoon incident where I said that, Muslims shouldn't. Their protest was more caused more problems to Islam than the cartoons did. That was actually carried as a lead letter by the Times. So we live in a, I mean, it's worth highlighting that the British media, in fact, is actually well respected throughout the world. BBC World Service, for instance, it's got a very good reputation. And at least in this country, there is the opportunity there. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Maybe the onus is on Muslims to portray that and to, you know, really arm themselves with these new technologies and use them.